All right, may I have your attention, please? I'd like to call the meeting to order. And on the screen behind me, as a loop is playing, it's all of the veterans that are members of the employees of the association. And in honor of Veterans Day next week, do we have any veterans in the audience? Would you gentlemen like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we do have a quorum with all 9 members, directors present, and the first order of business is the October 7th Governing Board workshop minutes. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes? Then they will stand as written. All right, new business. We have a couple of subcommittees under our standing committees, and we'd like to get a report on those if we could. Harry, would you start us off with your golf subcommittee, please?
The golf committee met with their 6 members on Tuesday. They had a good discussion amongst themselves, and it was about the electrical carts. Do we go forward now? Do we look at things now? And they have decided, their recommendation is to put everything off and let time go by, and maybe down the road it'll be time to take another look at it.
So the subcommittee is done meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Jack, would you like to tell us about your subcommittees?
Sure, I've got two subcommittees going. The first one is the Tournaments and Leagues Committee. They have met as a committee and have started meeting with different clubs. They have sent out an email to club officers and are meeting with them in group settings to gather the information on how these different clubs use tournaments or leagues. Again, their charter is to find out how tournaments and leagues are being conducted by Sun City West clubs, and to find out if there's a need to do anything, to make them uniform or whatever may come out of this. But it's really a fact-finding mission at this point.
Okay.
The other subcommittee that I have is the Clubtrack Reporting Committee. They've got 2 charters. One is to get with club officers and find out what existing reports within Clubtrack can be delivered to club officers on a regular basis. And the second one is to look to the future and to gather some wish list, if you will, of what Clubtrack might do in the future. No guarantee that any of those things will be used, but it's to develop perhaps a direction. So far, that subcommittee has met as a group. They have scheduled 3 sessions for, I believe it's next week, and they're going to have different club officers attend each of those sessions and gather those requirements. Casey Hewitt and Tim Peterson have been very helpful and instrumental with part of that work as well.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. Dick, we have some policy reviews that your committee looked at?
We do. We have 4 that we spent time on. 2 of them, FY2023 on insurance policy, and the other is on investor fees. When we looked at that, we took a perspective, and we read it, and they're not very long, and the person that was responsible on our committee for reviewing that asked a very simple question, and didn't seem that any of us could answer it. And we escalated it through Mr. Finelli, and it ended up with Mr. Hazelwood, our attorney. And so he went through and actually made on 2 of the policies, FY5 and FY09, He suggested, and he actually authored the changes that we have included in them.
Okay.
So upon that, we thought, well, that's the standard that we're going to have to use. So FY5 and FY9 are both, the changes in them were authored by our council, and so we proposed those as amended. So FY5 and FY09, and the title on that one is Owner Developer Facility Investment Fees. FY09 is a very, very minor changes. They appear to be editorial, but they're not. They're inclusive of all of the categories that should be in this particular policy. So we from the Budget and Finance Committee, we would forward these as edited, and and our recommendation is approval on those two. The other two is FY11, and that one is on disbursement authorization. And the other policy that we have was FY17, and that is the asset preservation fee. And we offer no proposed changes, and they should be, we recommended that they be remain intact.
Okay. Is there any board discussion on these? We'll also have another opportunity. Excuse me, Sharon.
I just had one question. Does special housing include group homes? Is that one of the reasons why it's special housing?
Actually, I believe I don't know if by definition if it does. Let me pull that up again.
I know there was questions before about whether or not we had group homes in Sun City West, and I believe we do because it's an ADA requirement, but I'm not positive anymore.
I don't know that the policy defines that as a group home as special housing. Our council has instructed us specifically that we should include special housing.
Okay. I'm fine.
Okay, any other comments? We will move these to our general meeting next week, I believe, so we'll have time to comment on them then too, also. Roberta.
Could board members bring their mics closer so we can hear them? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving forward, September 2022 financial and capital reports, Mr. CFO.
Did you want a truncated portion of this? This is a replication of what I presented at the BNAP.
We would like the key features
Okay.
that you think the board needs to hear.
Absolutely, thank
Okay.
you. So what was presented up there just a second ago was the financials. You can go online anytime. I see Lisa has it in her hands, for example, and that's just so small that we turned that up on the screen into the presentation, Kathy, if you'll go to the presentation. No, yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'd ask you to go to the year-to-dates. Yeah, these are all the month-to-dates, so you can, anybody can see these online. Keep going down, please. So anybody online or board members, you can glance at the same time. Now we'll go to the year-to-dates, though. Okay, so these are the expense sides, and at this juncture, we've been having favorable variances in our wages, benefit, taxes. Part of that was some openings that still linger in areas of golf maintenance and landscaping, but also there was some downtime at Beardsley during the renovation that created some favorable variance. Overall, therefore, through the first quarter, we're about $240,000 ahead of budget on expenses. Now, if you could go back one, please. So on revenues, pretty flat line on almost everything. Golf has been doing well on, this is golf fees. The range balls and carts are an ancillary. So on revenue side, about 140,000 favorable. So good position on both of the components of the operating income. If you'll go down 2, please. So here is our status. There's the same 140 grand and 240 off to the right. So on operating, I want you to remember that number when we give the status for year-to-date overall, about a 380,000 favorable on operating. Real quick shot against prior year on the next slide. The operating revenues did have rate hikes in golf and bowling. So to be 120,000 ahead would be expected, but we're actually not quite as far ahead as we were anticipating. Against prior year on expenses, this is most notably in the wage adjustments that were put in July. And also there's been increased chemicals, fertilizers, oil and gas, inflation. So the overall operating expenses are up almost 670,000, with the vast majority of that being in labor. So against our current year, we are about 550,000 less than prior year. And those are the two components that were against prior year expense that I've already communicated. So moving to what we call the capital related portion, you can see the categories off to the left: APFs, investment income, realized depreciation and loss on sale. APFs has, could you actually go down one? Let's go to the year to date. Thank you. So there's been a lot of discussion around the community on APFs and slowing home sales and things like that. We do only have about a 30,000 variance year to date through September, but we, just like anybody, we apportion our budget to be less than the 100 a month average that we anticipate within the budget. We put a slower number into July, August, and September. So before I came here, I think I saw October's, and we're down about $60,000 in October alone. So I don't want to get a whole lot of comfort in just being 30,000 down. I think this number could be rather troubling throughout the year. Another troubling number, of course, no surprise, but markets and the bond market, equity markets and the bond markets have struggled in the first quarter. So we've recorded a $1.34 million reduction. It equates to about 4% of the portfolio. And so overall on capital related, we're down about 1.36 million year to date. Against prior year, if you could go back one, against prior year, almost the same things, but you can see that the strong year we had in APFs last year, almost 1,600 by the end of the year. We're already showing a deficit of about 150,000, and same issue in the unrealized that occurred against prior year. So down about 1,350,000 against prior year on capital related. We can go past that. Thank you. So that's just a summary of everything, and then we'll move to the capital related portion of the presentation. So 10.8 million was what the prior year board approved. And so far on about 6 closed projects, we've recorded just a slight overage. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that it's a whole lot of stuff still in front of us. We project to be favorable by the end of the year. Sharon, I think you've asked me a few times, which is really good question, that where do we stand on any individual project? So it's published right here. Any positive or negative off to the that's listed in yellow means it was closed, paid for, completely done. If you go to the next slide for a second. So we've issued about 10.1 million of POs on 10.8. So at this juncture, we have about a 700,000 left to be issued. You'll see off to the left, on existing issued POs, we have about a 38,000 overage. And we're never, ever going to expend POs that exceed the authority. However, if we could make that argument that we were permitted about $70,000 more. If you could page up one, Cliff, you'll see in the third line out to the right that the general manager did request 74,000 of F&F additional capital for the parking lot out here in Johnson. And so technically we're not over the allotment with the governing board's additional approval, but we're always trying to stay within our original budget regardless. Having said that, you'll see three numbers, back one, you'll see three numbers right in the smack middle of the board here, 75,000 in red, 44,000 and 40. Of course, you guys know a little bit about this. You had your GM meeting on Monday, but for the broad public here, those three items are what's considered new. So pushing something down at the bottom, for example, that 28,000 that hasn't been issued, just saying we're not going to do it doesn't really help the association, because it just means I reinsert it into the reserve study and then inflation hits and we're, no benefit to us long term. But the three that I just highlighted, those would be considered savings, true savings, if the board makes a discussion about those and makes a decision to delay or even eliminate those. So we could overcome that 37,000 deficit with any one of those decisions. Having said that, there's actually already some banter going on about the gate enclosure, the right in the middle, the 44,000. For those that don't know, that's the area between the social hall and Fry's. And a gate was included in that project, but there's also some other peripheral work. It seems like, given some of the potential that's going on, that the gate has a lot of value, but the rest could probably wait. So we might have already made our savings in that one area alone. That's enough on that. And then the last slide, allowances. We've issued 28,000 year to date. You'll see the detail. I won't go into any length on that, but there were no changes in September. So the last one that I'd like to do, this is, Cliff has done some presentations and I agree with him. At the end of the day, we've made the phrase, it's all about the reserve and the FFB. And so this slide is probably one of the most critical of all. FFB percent is currently was entering the year at 54%. We had projected inflows of 6.6 million and then the middle outflows of 1.3 million. So where do we stand through the first quarter? The operating, as I mentioned, was 381 favorable. I didn't highlight it, but we're favorable on investment earnings, especially because of the higher bond yields. And the APFs currently are only 23 grand, but I expect that one to potentially get worse. I mentioned the closed POs right now are a nominal amount of only 17. We expect that to be 0 by the end of the year. And the unspent allowance right now is the best it's going to be, so any expenditures against that would only worsen it throughout the year, but right now we've barely spent any. And of course the reserve fund valuation change. So the projected, meaning as we anticipated within our budget, we were expected to be at 50%. With those factored in, we anticipate now we'd be in the 49% range exiting out of FY23. So any questions for me? Yeah.
Excuse me. Sharon?
Do you have any recommendation about whether or not any of the capital expenses should be removed or moved over to a different year? I know you said with inflation it'll move it down. I understand that now it goes back into the 30. But is there any recommendation on any of those from the?
Just to clarify, are you talking the three I highlighted, or?
As well as others. Are there any others besides those three that you've highlighted that are there?
We've already done some work on that, and I'll explain. When within one of the higher dollar ones of golf maintenance, the spend was about 1.3 million, and inflation hit there really hard. Toro's was our vendor, and we had the bids out, but Toro was selected. Their price was up almost 10% year over year. I mean, they're getting hit with a lot of costs as well, and they threw that on to us. So when we did the budget, we put in for 3% and 4% inflation as part of the reserve study. And so when we actually did go to the POs, the $1.3 million was still maintained. And one of the ways we had that was, and it's still in there as a negative, but we said, we're gonna push one of them out and just not spend. And so they didn't exceed the amount of the POs, but it still needs to be done at a future date. And, you know, that could be good or bad for us depending on when the need, but we make those decisions always to try to stay within it. Carl is gonna be speaking in a bit. He might throw a little bit of highlight onto one of the larger dollar new items. That's the $75,000 masonry wall out by Lasso Limewood, I think is the streets. That could be one that's the decision might be made by a state mandate or a county mandate. So.
One other question. I get asked about why, you know, I know we're doing the desert landscaping. I'm on the 7th tee at Grandview, so I'm sure they're going to start pretty soon on our side. But I keep getting asked, why can't we wait on that? Why can't we put some of that off? And I don't know the reason. I don't know the answer to give people in the community.
Yeah.
So any suggestion? I mean, is it a time factor that we have to have it done by a certain time? Is there some reason we can't put some of it off, or that it all has to be done at once?
Yeah, I heard everything but the actual project. What did you say? Which one?
The landscaping, the change to desert landscaping.
Grandview Detour.
Well,
Sorry.
I was going to say that might be Todd. I'm sorry.
It actually has been pushed back 3 years already. Yes.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Mr. Hurley. I do want to make, and these are maybe some editorial comments, and I'd like you to comment on those. I think that we all understand the importance of the reserve fund, and we know that there are multiple moving pieces in that, and we really shouldn't look at individual line items in it. But I want to make two comments, one of which is we talk about doing well with our expenses that we saved on there. What that really says is that something's stopped, something is closed, something isn't where we wanted it to be because we planned. And if 65% of our cost is in labor, then that means 65% of that theoretically is labor. So that tells us that we probably have labor problems or labor shortages or something. And the other comment that I want to make and is on APFs. 30%, over 30% of our revenue comes from APFs. We are probably 30% down. And when we extend those dollars out at $4,200 per to the end of the year, you know, you have to do the math with it. You know, that's a lot of money, and that's revenue, direct revenue that we receive. So could you validate
Sure.
that for me? Because those were my editorial
Sure.
comments.
Not judging anything you said, there are two modifications I'd say to your statements. Actually, of our capital inflows, APFs represent 70, almost 75%. So when you have shortage in there, it can present some problems. A few minutes ago, I did highlight that we're down about 22,000 in the BNF committee. I anticipated that might grow to $600,000-700,000 shortfall by the end of the year.
Yeah.
To the expense side, I do believe that Todd would be best served as the two biggest shortfall areas of where we are on positive, so to speak, expense favorable through September is in his areas. So I know that they're very pleased with the overseeding, the way it's looking right now. I just think he does his best to overcome those adversaries, and he's done it for a long time, and we should be very grateful. Did I answer on the capital portion?
Any other questions? I have one, and actually it's for Roberta, since she's our resident real estate expert. Roberta, do you have any feel for how long houses are staying on the market now? I know 6 months ago, it was 2 or 3 days, but can you tell us anything?
They were 45, now they're up to 60.
Okay.
And in a lot of areas, they're not moving at all.
A 6-year low in housing sales, okay.
So,
Well, the budget process has a long way to go, and I'm sure there will be modifications to it as the crystal ball it gets clearer. So, all right, any other questions?
I would, before Carl speaks, I think this has been brought up virtually at every committee, including BNF. There are, when you really look at that, inflows, you're subject to not a lot of things you can control. Operating, yes, to some extent, especially in the budget process. We'll get more into that. You can do things with rates, expenses, dues, things like that. But down on the bottom side, on the projected outflows, in the modeling, the one item that's almost directly within this board's authority is the new capital spend. And I think the comment I would make is we want to do everything that enhances the association, fills the needs of its owner members, but that is the one area that you can directly control in this FFB, and as always occurs, I hope we apply judicious spending on that in the upcoming cycle. But 5-6 months to go, and we've got a lot of time to discuss it. And things could change on the housing market, could change on the reserve funds, things
Sure.
like that. So,
Well, having heard the different committees, everyone, all the committees are tending towards the more conservative approach to the budget, so we'll see.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Finelli. Mr. Wilhelm, would you enlighten us on the capital projects, please? Oh, wait a minute, there's the Brown and Brown. Who is going to do that, by the way? You can do it? Okay, Dick, would you give us a brief account of the Brown and Brown health insurance renewal?
Well, not to sound flip, but this will be brief, 34% increase. That's a breathtaking number. And it's one that in my life and in my working life, third-party healthcare recoveries, I lived and breathed that every day. And Brown and Brown, Charles Bushell and Paula Campbell were here from Brown and Brown, and they presented some very compelling data regarding the numbers of claims versus the amount of premiums. And using some of their actuarial formulas, they demonstrated to us to the best that they could, the reasons, and it all has to do with how much was paid out relative to how much was paid in premiums. There are some several very high cost cases that are ours, that are our covered beneficiaries, and they projected the cost of them out. One of the things that they ask, or that they told us, and it would have been just before we would have asked, is, well, can't we shop around and maybe find a different carrier or a different provider? And the answer that they gave us was that they tried to do that, and there were 3 companies that refused to even bid on or to underwrite anything that we had. And they were very Aetna, Blue Cross, and I don't remember what the other one was. And United Healthcare. And this whole issue is relatively, it has peaks and valleys, and so maybe in 2 years we might be able to have a different result from that. The consolation they had is that, well, they've cut their commission by $20,000. And in my world, I knew what that meant, and I said, well, maybe you could add another $20,000 to that cut, and I don't think that was received very well. The long and the short, the good news is that we're ready to go again, but it's going to cost us 34% more. There are things that we could do, but there are decisions prior to this. We recently increased our participation, the rec center's participation, in paying employees from 80 to 85%. They're going to be hit with the increased premiums. They're the 15% of the total, and that's going to go up. We don't really want to change. We don't want to retract any of that we gave, that we for employee and enticement. That's counterproductive. But we're really kind of between a rock and a hard spot on this, and. So unless anybody has any questions, I won't be able to explain the actuarial formulas, should you ask that, but the bottom line is more cost went out than they had planned.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that? All right.
If we could start with the document first. Right there, right in the middle, yep. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Over the last week and a half, we've had some very successful discussions with Budget and Finance, and then moving over to Chartered Clubs Committee, and finally closing with the Properties Committee. In October, we presented the initial proposed capital improvements for the FY2023-24 budget cycle for review. And now in November, we reviewed that same document and list with all changes. I'd like to just share with you the changes today so that everybody's aware. And then after that presentation, I'll go into a quick slide presentation for any additional questions that the board might have. Starting with this document, there were 4 CR13 requests provided of new capital. The only change to those dollar amounts was a value engineered approach to the request that the softball club asked for the bleacher area renovation. And I believe that meeting their needs and making adjustments and taking a right-sized approach to this request, we've reduced that $650,000 to a $350,000 project. Moving on to new capital, non-CR13 club related, there was a committee, subcommittee meeting, and the recommendation for EV electrical and mechanical assessments was to hold until further notice. So that has been removed from the budget, $93,100. Facilities maintenance did a further investigation and air quality test and concluded no changes were required at the Kuntz Art Room. So that $50,000 has been removed from the budget. After moving along with the lighting improvements that we have in this current budget that we're operating from, I was unavailable. I have not been able to solve the lighting issue in the social hall and converting those to LED fixtures. What came from that was opening a discussion that facilities maintenance, Russ Boston and myself have been having for a few years about the renovation of the social hall. So the existing ceiling simply does not allow us to convert those lights and make them dimmable because of the fixtures that were built into that design. So I am asking for $25,000 in engineering and architectural to do a review of that space and provide next year a proposal to renovate the social hall ceiling with new lighting and ceiling system. I have a slide on that I can answer more questions. That's it for the new portion of this document. Moving on to R&R. An adjustment was made in the softball field outfield fence replacement after receiving bids, updating the bids from the vendors. We've had an increase of $50,851. Bocce courts at R.H. Johnson, you're going to see a surprising jump here from $51,346 to $197,600. The reasoning behind that, once I really didn't know what to expect in turf removal when I went out to bid. So as the 2 months have gone by, I have received two estimates from two major turf replacement companies, and their bids came in at $240,000+ and $197,600. So I was pretty sticker shocked when I saw this change from $51,000. Reason being is that when the courts in between the existing bocce courts were added, that was the price that was put into the tool when the tool was being created, the reserve studies tool. So there's been never any accounting of the full 13 courts. So to move forward with that project, the price proposed in the budget would be $197,600. This isn't just an artificial turf, it's also a padded bocce artificial turf. So a little bit more work than was expected there. Moving down to the Kuntz pool heater replacement, Russ has received the bids for updated pool heater replacement, and that was increased due to inflation to $77,250, which is a $28,416 change. Facilities maintenance has also reviewed the request to have the craft rooms 3, 4, and 5 chair replacement done at Kuntz. They believe that they have a solution that's worth investigating for improved mobility of those chairs. Those are heavy chairs, and instead of spending $51,000, they believe that they can solve it by making a better system on the feet of those chairs. In the golf portion of R&R, quite a few changes have been made. The golf maintenance equipments, the CFO and Todd Patty did a real thorough investigation on their inventory, and they had a reduction of $310,966. Todd has brought forward Stardust golf course shorelines repairs, and that is a new request of $231,855. Echo Mesa irrigation system design work is an add for $206,000. This is being proposed to stay in front of the Echo Mesa irrigation replacement, just like Grandview had done. And then at golf maintenance vehicles, we had a $107,572 reduction also due to an inventory evaluation. Todd received quotes for the cart path slurry seal at Grandview. Inflation has increased that by $20,019. And then finally, golf course aeration at Echo Mesa 1 and 8 is being curtailed, and a removal for $6,956. There are no changes in the allowance category, and I would like to review and allow any questions in the presentation portion.
Okay, Carl got grilled pretty well by the three committees he's already appeared to, but if anyone has any additional questions?
Yeah, actually, I do.
Sure, go ahead, Jim.
Carl, for the batting cages for the softball club, there's talk about running power out there. Question occurred to me, who is going to pay for that power to run those cages? And the second question is, depending upon the access that they have, if it's tokens or mag stripe cards, where is that may require a network connection? How will that be handled, and who will pay for that?
So if the governing board approves a project and the purchase of a project is final, when it's finalized, it becomes an asset of the rec centers, and whether it's a building addition or anything like that,
Carl, let me rephrase my question. I wasn't clear. Who's going to pay for the operational expenses for the electricity and the network, if necessary?
I would answer it the same way. So once we've assumed the asset on property, we assume electric. We have never subdivided electrical expenses to any club that I am aware of.
Thank you.
And then your second question?
I think the answer is probably the same. If there's a network need, that the association would pick that up too.
I will tell you that the documents that I received from the club are not that, it's not that high end of a product. The ball machine is right for what they want, but the token equipment was part of their original quote that I reviewed, and it's not that sophisticated. So,
Director Vines, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, President Hurley. Carl, can you tell me when the last time the bocce courts have been redone? You may have said it, and I apologize if I don't remember.
I do believe they're over 14 years old, and only 3 of them are younger, and it was somewhere around the time frame the pool was built, I believe.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. Carl?
Moving on to the capital-related proposal for slide presentations. Again, I will pause at the primary areas for discussion. So starting off with CR 13 requests, we had softball field clubhouse expansion. My opinion or recommendation for this still stands that unless the governing board directs staff to provide engineering and planning, there is not a solvable option for this. The building can't be reconstructed in its current position, and the 2,000 square foot option B to build a new building elsewhere, we don't have the infrastructure behind the outfield fence. So if this was to be pursued, then it would have to go to a higher level of planning and development somewhere else on the property.
Okay. Ann?
Thank you, President Tim. One question I didn't ask earlier at BNF, and I thought about it later, is this is a clubhouse specific to one club. Do they need that specific to one club? I mean, if they're having meetings, don't we have plenty of other places within our association walls where they could have a meeting?
I believe the club has responded to that question by all the committees, and they currently meet at other multi-purpose rooms, so that does happen. That's how they do their business day-to-day as it stands. Their primary request here was for storage of their equipment, uniforms, and the benefit of having clubs in that same functioning space as storage, air conditioning, meeting space. So they asked, and if we could solve it, that wrapped it up in one project.
Well, pursuant to that, then, there is no storage space available anywhere in the Kuntz complex?
No, there is not. They have their dedicated space, and anything that's deemed storage at Kuntz is already been allocated to somebody for a reason.
Okay, thank you.
Director Vines?
Thank you, President Hurley. Carl, on Kuntz property, some of the clubs have sheds over there. Is there room there for them to add a shed? They are locked, and there's a gate there as well. Would that not be an area where they could utilize space?
So I will say that there's sheds located outside of between the art room and the leather room, and those are just nice, cheap sheds, and they're not conditioned. The club did ask for a conditioned storage space. The club does have a nice storage shed behind the outfield. The question did come up, could we build another one and basically add an air conditioner to it? That has not been answered, but I'm sure that that's a possibility. Again, they came to the table with a big picture request, so I haven't heard any further discussion on any other requests from that or changes.
Okay, so would it be possible for you, I know this is off the cuff, but to ballpark if we said an additional shed what they're asking for, where they're at now?
I don't think I would like to do that right now. Let's get consensus that that's what you're asking me, and I could bring that information forward.
Okay.
Any other questions for Carl?
Moving on to the Kuntz softball field bleacher area renovation. Again, with a discussion with the club. Originally, they did ask for the very nice 2016 plans to be considered for a bleacher area renovation. but most important to them was the ADA improvements around their first and third base lines, including a full replacement of bleachers. So taking that into consideration, I have discussed bleacher renovation with some bleacher vendors. I have gotten a price point for that. I have reviewed the area around the clubhouse and the first and third base line. I do have avenues that could be improved for ramp access up to the restrooms, which was part of the request. So I believe that this project, if recommended, could be solved for $350,000.
Any questions, Dick?
Carl, it was my understanding that that everything, all the bleachers were ADA compliant. So if either they are or they're not, so, you know, is there an ADA deficiency here?
No, there is not. The bleachers in their existing build are not ADA bleachers at all. They're just placed with ADA compliance. So understand that the request from the club was that they would like a bleacher system that helps improve ADA access to those bleachers. And if you see in the upper left corner, that is a bleacher system with a ramp that would come from the upper parking lot and have a mid-deck ADA level, so the bleachers could be above and below. But bleachers are built to code, if you will. But the ADA portion of their request was to make everything more accessible. So the first baseline bleachers are purely a replacement of the old bleacher system and pushed back so that it creates a more ADA accessible frontage.
Is this the only place? I guess this is to me is a new issue, because it was my understanding that we are in ADA compliance. You know, I still, are we violating anything? I mean, do we have, we're just making it more ADA?
It is my opinion that we have no ADA violations.
And no safety issues?
That
Because
is-
I've seen one safety report where someone fell.
That was brought to our attention as well.
Yes, one, and I haven't seen anything beyond that.
And that was confirmed by the club themselves as well.
Right, so I guess I don't think my position has changed on this. I just wanted to get clarity that we don't have any, we are in ADA compliance, that this just makes it, I guess, more accessible.
In working with the club, though, they did make a very respectful request for improvements to bleachers, which, good, bad, or indifferent, are probably worthy of just a refresher on the bleachers. And their interest in creating a more ease of access for the ADA community, you could never perceive as a negative. So those are the requests at hand.
Well, I actually really respect the softball club. I mean, they have done a tremendous job in building physical plant, and you know, they've been very considerate of that. We're in a new world right now, you know, and you know, we're looking at needs, not wants. And I'm just trying to struggle, is this a need or a want?
And that would be for you all to decide.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon?
Thank you, Dr. Hurley. Just for clarification in ADA, what this does, Dick, is it actually has a wheelchair. They've just expanded the space in front of the first row so that a wheelchair can get through. So the wheelchair can get through, so it's ADA okayed. The problem is if you are with a walker or a cane, you cannot go anywhere except sitting in the front row. You cannot go up anywhere of those because you'd be going to go take your walker with a cane going upstairs. So although we're ADA compliant, it's not ADA accessible for most people. It's like sitting in the front row of a movie theater. If that's the only place you can sit, that's where you sit and you do this. So you can see the field as well. And it is a hazard because you have people with canes and walkers trying to go up those stairs because they don't want to, they can't see, or they can't, people walk by all the time. So if you're sitting in the front row, you can't see. So that's the reasoning. I just want to kind of, because when I went out, I looked at that specifically. So yeah, we are compliant. No one's gonna say we're not. It's just that it's very difficult for somebody to use the facilities.
Jack?
So I have what may be a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there space behind the current bleachers on the first and third base side? Can we just pull them back? Is that possible?
No, I don't believe it is after evaluating the existing bleachers. The third baseline bleachers have a build and a tiering, and then there's a concrete masonry wall behind it that holds the earth back. Yeah. So pushing it back, there's no room. And they currently use that as storage, and it was designed for that, and it's very functional today. But pushing it back, not there. The same with the one on first base. The space allows for it, but the structures do not.
Okay.
Moving on to the softball field, full field artificial turf, $450,000. My evaluation of this stands. This is from conversations with our previous installer, General Acrylics, and you can see in my slide, replaces yearly irrigation cost, environmental services field maintenance, and seasonal overseeding expenses of approximately $25,000 per year. You'll notice in that $25,000, there's no comment about staffing. If staffing was not to be distributed to this field for its weekly maintenance, its seasonal maintenance, that staffing would still be used elsewhere in the rec center. So there is no compensation being made in this project for staffing. The assumption for water is the CFO and I took the yearly Kuntz water expense of $40,000 and took a factor of 25% and applied it to this as savings. So between the $10,000 of water saved and $15,000 of other expenses, you could formulate $25K per year. Replacing this turf, you do get an 8-year limited warranty and 12 years of expected useful life.
Any questions on the artificial turf? Okay.
And finally, Kuntz softball field batting cages, 55-6. The club has asked for 2 batting cages to be installed behind the outfield fence line. There is ample room for that. Multiple questions have come up about sound, some design changes due to perception of how the machine pitches, and those items are going to be continually pursued over the next couple months, so there could be some changes to this. But as right now, 55-6 stands, and the only thing I'd like to comment is that most likely that cage should not be used as the example of final build, but more of an example of security. So if we needed to secure it on the sides and only have club access or whatever the governing board and staff determines of who's using this, it would be similar, but the roof, the upper deck of that cage would probably get taller due to the pitch of the ball is what I'm understanding.
Any question on batting cages? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Ann?
Thank you. So you're saying that this would not be open to the public? It would be in a rec center facility, but the batting cage could only be used by club members?
I'm not certain if that's a governing board or a staff decision, but that's not my decision. So I think that needs to be discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Over here, Kate? Okay. All right. Carl?
Okay, moving on to new capital in general. We do have the Beardsley Arts and Crafts shade structure and concrete for $45K. This is 18 by 31 shade structure on paver base, removing some of the concrete that exists and finishing the area that used to be a planter box. I'm just going to go right through these unless I see a hand raised. Jack?
There was a tree there. Was there thought given to replace it with another shade tree?
I think it was discussed, but life that it takes to grow a tree to create the same shade and environment that they're trying to get out of this idea would take so long.
So there was no thought given to buying a more mature tree?
Not requested of me.
Okay, thank you.
Desert Trails Pro Shop, storage area and roof structure, and then the patio shade structure. So you have two areas here. The golf ops team is asking for the mason area enclosure in the top left picture, left-hand side. Most of our golf courses that have a mason area enclosure like this do have a steel roof structure so that they can preserve their goods, protect the items that can be stored outside but still need to stay dry. This creates a 500 square foot dry storage space. And then moving on to the right-hand side, a patio canopy. And this is an identical successful project that we did at Deer Valley. It increases a 256 square foot shaded patio space and overall 546 square foot of concrete patio space. R.H. Johnson pickup truck, $36,500, no changes there. The truck is a little different than what we would actually purchase, but. Okay, moving on to a new request that was added is the R.H. Johnson Social Hall ceiling lighting renovation. Again, I mentioned that I am not capable of renovating the lighting due to the way these light fixtures, their size and how they were built into that ceiling. Nobody builds these ceilings anymore. That came clearly from one of the leading industry acoustical ceiling companies in the valley that we had out a week ago. And but this is a solvable project. Russ and his team is struggling with the availability of tiles to replace. You can see that they're unsightly. They're stained from years of just air conditioning condensation, maybe a roof leak here and there. And virtually we have no tiles left. We have saved a few tiles from the hallways just in case, but it's not enough to make any dent in the overall project. The Properties Committee walked this. They had a clear understanding of what the request was for, and I believe that they had a positive recommendation to move this forward. So I'm asking for $25,000 in design and engineering investigative costs, come up with a plan so that in the next cycle of budgeting, I can actually give you a renovation ceiling cost. Sports Pavilion Lizard Acres sound system, $21,000. This is a new item because it doesn't exist. You'll see in the R&R that there's a Sports Pavilion sound system improvement, and the two go hand in hand, but this was not something that was ever accounted for due to the change of Lizard Acres. And then staff is simply asking for a storage container, as you see in the picture, to be put over in the east side of R.H. Johnson for storage of equipment, grills, miscellaneous items, and even possibly parking a golf cart inside for security. And that concludes new. Any questions?
I'm sorry, it was really quick, but can you elaborate a little bit on the sound system for Lizard Acres? Since it is new and I wasn't in the loop.
I have to be honest that I really don't have a lot of information. I'm representing this for Barry Hardesty. I think you would be able to get your clear answer. He put this request in at your committee.
No, he didn't, he went directly. So,
Yeah, I
okay, I'll
apologize.
talk to
It's
him.
not a project that I would directly manage, so I'm not aware of the design.
Thank you.
Sharon?
One other question about the Lizard Acres one. There seemed to me there was another one for sound system.
Yeah, it's
Are they
coming
being
up.
done, are they being done, I'm just asking if they're being purchased together, is that the intent?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to R&R, R.H. Johnson parking lot, mill and replacement, 978.5. No changes here from over the last 2 months. The Coons softball field outfield fence replacement, $699,752. I did have an increase in vendor estimates that is shown here in this price. My only comment that I would recommend that if there was a positive recommendation of the artificial field turf, that it would be beneficial that we did these two projects at the same time. I realize that that is a lot of an expense, But the bottom line is the fence is not falling down if that's curtailed to a further date. But if you are gonna, down the road, approve the artificial turf, I think it would be mindful to consider doing this fence replacement at the same time. Beardsley Arts and Crafts parking lot, mill and replacement. I didn't mention in the previous slide about R.H. Johnson. That cost is anticipated to have 100% soil stabilization, and it is factored in there. When you move on to Beardsley, I have a minimal contingency factored into this cost for soil stabilization. History showed that it wasn't needed quite so much in the 7 or 8 years ago when the aquatics portion of this complex was done. Moving on to Palm Ridge pickleball light fixture replacement, $309,000. I have no changes here. This is a continuation of our lighting program and one step closer to finalizing our sports venues. If this is approved, the remaining venues would be lawn bowling, and then sometime in the future, a conversation if anything was done at the tennis facility at Kuntz. Sports Pavilion bowling lanes replacement, $278,226. R.H. Johnson pool deck resurface, rubber deck. We have 13,810 square feet of existing pool deck. We are experiencing failures. Facilities maintenance is doing a phenomenal job in putting a temporary repair coating down. It's not the nicest looking coating. We could not do that throughout the whole entire deck. It's not the solution, it's the temporary fix. So we are recommending that the R.H. Johnson pool get the same decking that Kuntz exterior pool deck has. R.H. Johnson bocce courts 1 through 13. This is the one that I mentioned that there was a considerable change from the October estimate to what we see here today, 197,600. And you'll see that there's 13 courts. There's a lot of turf here. That's 70 foot by 13 foot per course and per court. And the original factor was just for the 3 that went in between the existing 4 down on the lower left-hand corner. Grandview Pro Shop, mill and replacement, 53,000 square foot parking lot, and has a minimal anticipated soil stabilization cost factored in. Same with Trail Ridge, 53,000 square foot parking lot, also minimal anticipated soil stabilization. A reason I bring this up is the difference between minimal and taking a much larger decision for like R.H. Johnson is simply if this comes a little bit over budget due to an unknown factor of soil stabilization, it's within the general manager's signing authority, we move forward. If not, just like this year, we came to the governing board with the facts and findings for anything over 50,000. So that would be the same approach if anything was determined here. Nothing's changed in the Beardsley Fitness cardio equipment replacement, $123,000 for 10 pieces of equipment. Sports Pavilion bowling ball return replacement. This goes hand in hand with the lane replacement. Russ experienced a little higher cost increase in the pool heater replacement at Kuntz. Metal shop roof tile replacement. This takes our tile back to a 30-year warranted felt structure underneath the tile. We reused the same tile. We just put down a new underlayment. And then a recoating or resurfacing of the flat roof. And you can see in the photos, we've occurred blistering in the last couple of years. But nothing's leaking through to the building. This is just the surface bubbling, and we'll get that solved next year. And then finally, the last items are under 50K, the Beardsley Clay Club flooring replacement, some HVAC units, Memo's cabinets and countertop, bowling area sound system, an auto scrubber machine at Beardsley, and the lawn bowling flat roof restoration, a very small roof. That concludes my portion of the capital budget.
Okay, do we have any questions for Carl? Okay, I do want to give the committees a reminder that your recommendation for the new capital budget items needs to be in by December 1st. So make sure it's in your minutes, and you'll accept the minutes as the writing, okay? Ann?
President Tim, where do we go from here? Is the board going to vote on these items?
The vote by policy has to vote on every item over $100,000, but I believe we're gonna do it on over $50,000.
Okay,
An
and when-
individual item vote.
And when will we do that?
Carl?
May I just make a comment? This season, this cycle that we're reviewing right now is for your recommendation to be placed into the general manager's first official budget.
Okay.
So the next 2 months, or January and February, would be the $50,000 and $100,000 reviews.
Okay,
That's what I was referring to not the final decision, because I know that comes with the budget, but are we going to vote on these?
we'll vote at our next meeting,
Okay.
next week.
Okay,
So
is it next week or 2 weeks?
I think it's next week,
I
isn't
thought
it?
it was the 17th.
17th.
Just feels like next week. Just feels like.
I just,
It's gone. It's completely gone.
It is.
Okay. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We've got a reminder that voting usually takes place in the social hall down here, but this year it's going to be taking place at the Palm Ridge Summit Rooms. So if you want to vote in person, Palm Ridge is the place to do it on November 7th and 8th.
Do we also have a ballot drop? We have a ballot drop. Yeah.
There will be a ballot drop at that location on those days. Okay. Do you know if the posse's doing collecting ballots too? They did last time. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Board director comments. Roberta? Harry? No comments. Director Vines?
No comment.
Ann?
Thank you, President Tim. I'm a little concerned about the unspent capital this year, and do we need to be looking at making a recommendation of whether or not we want to defer some of that or keep it in abeyance, seeing how the financials are going? Because especially the APFs coming in low
Right.
has me a little concerned. Do we need to be spending this, and if so, do we need to take action?
You referring to the 10.8? They've
No,
already.
I'm referring to the 372,000 that's not yet spent. And some of those items, when we talked about them, the gate and the limewood and some of those things, I know we approved them, but do we need to consider not moving forward with them without further approval? Is maybe what I'm thinking.
Carl?
For clarification, Hello. Just for clarification, I'd like to say the 372 that I think you're referencing is allowances. So that's one portion, and I'm not sure what the total of unopened or unwritten POs is. Pete Finelli can give you more, but Pete did point out 3 particular line items based on projection. $75,000 for the Limewood Lasso project. The $44,000 for the fencing and gate at Environmental Services Yard here at R.H. Johnson. And then a roof structure over the cargo containers for $40,000. Staff has already discussed at the general manager's meeting to curtail those until February. So that at the best right now, we won't even consider moving forward. The only thing that I will consider moving forward with is the investigation on Limewood and Lasso, because it's possible that the canal department and McDOT might put some roadblocks on me there based on some initial conversations, so.
Okay. So 4 more months from now in February, hopefully we'll have a better picture of what the economy is going to do.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, my error. I was thinking that it was a combination of projects to the 372, not the allowances. Thank you.
Okay. Jack?
No comments.
Sharon?
Just 2 comments. One, I wanted to thank Jack's group at Beardsley. Elsie and Eldon did a magnificent job for Northwest Valley Connect. They were out there working for us all day, and they did a great job. And so I just wanted to thank them,
Good.
as well as Casey. Casey actually filled in and moved tables for us because we didn't have enough people that wanted to get up at 7 in the morning. So thank you very much. The other thing is, yesterday afternoon, I was appointed by the state legislature to sit on an urban air mobility task force for the state of Arizona. And to that end, it's not in my conflict of interest information that I originally signed. So if anything comes up that I can visually see that's going to cause a problem, I will let you know.
Air mobility, you talking about flying cars?
Yes, I am.
You're the girl for it.
We will be in the Jetson mode.
Director Rhodes.
No, I want to thank Carl and Pete for the hard work they've done. Carl has consistently provided a very professional, as has Pete and his staff in finance. Thank you very much.
Director Williams.
Again, I want to thank Russ and Carl for the inordinate amount of effort and time they have invested with our Properties Committee. For those who aren't aware, the bylaws require that committee do a walkthrough of every campus every year. And we've spent the last 6 Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m. starting that track. But it is a real asset to our committee and how we can perform by physically seeing these things that are especially being talked about in this upcoming budget. So we've learned a lot, and hopefully it'll show when we come to a vote. But thanks again to Carl and Russ, and also Jack's been there to a lot of our walkthroughs, and very, very helpful. And also the facility staff at each of those locations have been wonderful. Kudos, I know we've had some staff changes there. The new folks have jumped right in and done an excellent job of being with us while we did that. So just want to give them some recognition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One more tour next Tuesday. All right, I want to make a couple comments, having been through the budget process several times. To me, this is a perfect storm year because we've got a bad economy, we've got supply issues, we've got a shortage of workers, and we're having to pay them much more just to be able to compete with the outside market. So this budget process is going to be tough. I think we're going to need to make some hard decisions, and hope we're all ready for it. Okay? Director Vines. Never been there, but I'll take your word for it. All right, I can open up for visitor comments. If anybody has a comment, please step up to the microphone, give us your name and rec number. Anyone? Anyone? Okay. Bueller.
Hi, I can never remember my rec number. It's Nick Turner, 131829. With regards to the budget and the increasing prices, increasing costs, lack of revenue, would you I have two questions actually. The first one is, would you categorize that as a concern, possibly a big concern, but not a crisis? My second question is, if we start delaying capital projects next year, and we have to delay some more the year after, are we storing up too much work for Carl and his team because they're not going to have sufficient capacity in 2 or 3 years' time to do the catch-up on all of the capital projects?
Right. For your first question, I think this is an important topic to be discussing right now. I don't think it's critical. I don't think anyone's ready to walk off the cliff or anything like that, but I do think it's going to take extra attention this year. And second of all, there's really two components to the capital budget. One is R&R, which comes right out of our reserve study that goes out 30 years, so we know what to expect as the years roll along. Those, if we want to keep this place the way it is right now, we need to do those projects, okay? Before they come on to the budget, each one of the managers who controls portion looks at the items that are coming up for the budget. Do they need to be here? Can they be set back? Or in some cases, should they be brought forward from a following year? So that due diligence is done before it ever gets to the budget. Okay, the new portions of the budget is really what the board has control over to say yes or no. Is this going to add something to Sun City West? Is it a want versus a need? That type of thing. So, and as the budget process goes, we vote on individual items. We'll have a meeting where we go through the whole list of items over $50,000 and individually vote on each one. So, to answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Would you state your name again, please?
Lynn Kellis, 129-120. Basically, you covered what I was going to say. During the Charter Club meeting, we talked about wants versus needs. A year ago, I would have probably said, give Carl whatever he needs because we've got to get it before inflation hits and it's just going to get worse. Right now, I think it's a little different situation. Inflation is hitting and it's still probably going to get worse. So I think this is a time that we need to look seriously about the dollars that we are spending. Again, the wants versus the needs is really critical here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I am going to adjourn the meeting at, what time is it? 10:16. And the directors, we have an executive session over in the village meeting room, directly after this, yes.